one big learning I had in consulting, I still live by it. You'll have good days, you'll have bad days. Set a percentage for yourself that you say, as long as my good days are X% of my total time, I'm happy, right? So in consulting, I had a 50-50 split. As long as I'm happy 50% of the time. By the way, I don't recommend a 50-50 split. but, but I was saying back then, I was saying, as long as I'm happy 50% of the time, I can do this. I can push through. And then when I left, something had changed, right? Now I'm more in the kind of 70-30 range, right? As long as my good days are 70% of the time, I'm good. Because one thing to realize, no place, no company, no job, no situation, personal or professional, you will be happy 100% of the time. It just doesn't exist. And the faster you make peace with that fact, the faster you can think about turning frustrating situations into something that you take and learn from rather than just get frustrated from.
Super. Thanks for that.
So, Felix, getting into the senior executive ranks, we know a lot of it is, it's not all about what it's who in your network and those that help build you up over your career and advocate for you as well. Are there any particular influencers, mentors, coaches that you'd want to call out that kind of helped you along the career journey that you've had to the senior executive role you're in now?
Yeah, there are quite a few. One, frankly, is here, Chris. Chris has been a great sounding board for me in many ways, and I've always appreciated the conversations. There are a few others from McKinsey. One of them is called Matt Yoakum, one of the best people I've worked with, just great guy. And along the way, there have been more and more. Chris knows Mark Shaughnessy. I've spent a lot of time working with him. And then more recently, at my last company, Aaron Powell was a guy who helped me think through and facilitated the move to Singapore, which was just, as I mentioned earlier, just a great experience and added both personally and professionally so much. So, frankly, if I start going down the list too far, I'm going to be here for another 2 hours. I think, to me, the biggest advice, if it matters for the folks that listen, on how to think through mentors is actually don't think about people as mentors. Think about people as people. And so, to me, the people that added the most to my career, when I initially started talking to them, I wasn't thinking about, oh wow, I'm going to need to find a mentor now who's going to add a ton of value to my career, because it becomes such a functional relationship at that point that it doesn't really help, right? To me, it happens to be the people. I just enjoyed the company of these people. I enjoy talking to these people. Frankly, I consider all of them personal friends, right? And to me, I think there's this mentorship approach. It's almost been taken too far in some people's minds, I think, where people are trying to force a mentorship relationship rather than just taking it a bit more naturally and say, hey, look, like, here's a person. I think that person is, one, an inspiration and leader, two, a very nice person. And so I just want to talk to this person. And then that might or might not develop into something longer term where you stay in touch, but you can't plan it all out. I think you just have to take it as it goes. And I've been very fortunate with some of the people that I've been able to stay in touch with. And yeah, I enjoy talking to all of them whenever I have a chance to.
Good stuff.
Felix, we usually close with a general kind of perspective on advice. And so I think we ask this question in different ways, and you may have the same answer, you may have different. So if you think about best advice you have received or advice you most commonly offer to those who you lead, or one that I've always thought interesting is what was your advice, or what would your advice be to yourself 15 or 20 years ago? What are the things that come to mind, whether it's one or a couple things that you think the audience would benefit from?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So the one I mentioned earlier, I think, is my biggest one probably, is to have a vision for yourself. Think about where you want to be when you grow up, in air quotes, right? But really think through, what is your destination? Always think about that when you think through different stages or steps in your career, right? So always refer back to that. So that is the one. I already talked about that earlier, so I'm not going to go too far into that one. I think the second one is going to sound, I don't know, silly, funny, but I really mean it, is for me, when I was younger especially, I thought if I made a mistake, the world ended, right? And that led to me being very stressed many times. Now, I still get very frustrated with myself if I make a mistake, don't get me wrong. But I think the time of making a mistake, being frustrated, and going ahead to say, how do I make sure that this doesn't happen again? So the time from the mistake to how do I turn this into a learning opportunity has shortened dramatically. Right? When I was young, I mean, I would come home, I would spend the whole weekend beating myself up about making a silly mistake in Excel or whatever, right? And this is actually I heard a motivational speaker say this once, and I still remind myself every once in a while. He said, "Don't take yourself so damn seriously," right? And I think it's really good advice. Again, that doesn't mean whatever, right? It doesn't mean who cares about making mistakes, but it means mistakes happen. They will happen to you. They will happen to everybody else. By the way, everybody in the leadership position, all of your leaders, everybody has made mistakes, and everybody is making mistakes. And if you take yourself too seriously, you actually limit your opportunity from learning fast from a mistake. So don't take yourself so seriously. Most mistakes can be resolved, don't have substantial consequences in the long term. And so think about, how do you learn from it? How do you make sure that you take away something that will help you in your ongoing career?
Very good. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover yourself?
I think as we were talking in the beginning, right? The one thing I would say is sometimes supply chain operations doesn't look sexy, doesn't feel like the most glamorous thing to do. To me, it's exactly why I love it, right? It's the place where you don't always stand in the spotlight, which I like. I don't like being in the spotlight. I like doing the dirty work in the background. And so to me, there's just a lot of, I get excited when I talk about operations, when I talk about supply chain, especially because a lot of folks who work on the commercial side in marketing and whatever, the sexy functions, right? They're like, why would you ever be excited about this? And to me, there's just so much value you can create in the space, which then once you create it, you can talk about it. You don't have to go sell it, but you can say, hey, remember this new product launch, remember this rush stuff we had to get to customers and where they said no other company could do it but you. You don't need to go and pat yourself on the back. You can somewhere, but you can tell people, hey, just remember, guys, this wouldn't happen without operations. You can have all the marketing programs in the world. You can have a million salespeople walking around having great pitches. Without operations, there's no product. Without operations, the product doesn't get to the customer. Without operations, if you're in consumer goods, the consumer is not going to have your product. The consumer can't consume the product. And so if you really think about the impact operations has on the broader environment of the company, I think it's super exciting. And so for me, I think the only thing that I haven't mentioned before is, if you think about it and you wonder, is it the right place to go? And you hear people making fun of you, the more people make fun of you, the more you should want to go there, right? It's a great place to be. If you're a little bit like me and you're like, I'm going to show you, it's the perfect place to be. And so don't let anything deter you from going in the space. I think it's a great space. It's a fun space. And you can have a ton of impact being in the space.
A lot of job security too.
That's true. That's true. Hopefully no more COVID, but COVID led to a lot of job security.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
This was great, Felix. Thank you again for being patient with us and getting this done.
Of course. No, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Phyllis. We appreciate your time today.